Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Bradford Seminar this afternoon. My name is Nikki Sheets, and I'll be introducing our speaker this afternoon, Professor Shorna Allred from Cornell University. Many of you probably don't know me. I am a lecturer joining the faculty for the first time this semester. I'm teaching a task force in environmental justice, and in the spring, we'll be teaching a half course in environmental justice. Also, I am part of the environmental justice grassroots movement. I try to help the EJ movement develop the best possible policy from an environmental justice perspective. And that's why I'm particularly happy to be introducing our speaker today. Professor Allred is at Cornell. At the Center for, and let me just say about the introduction for full transparency, I will be reading from her bio initially, and then I'll editorialize just a little bit. So she's at Cornell at the Center for Conservation Social Science, which is in the Department of Natural Resources and the Environment. She also holds a joint faculty appointment with the Department of Global Development and in the Southeast Asian program. She was a recipient in 2018 of the Engaged Scholar Prize. Her research and outreach at Cornell focus on understanding human attitudes, motivations, and behavior related to natural resource conservation and management. Her primary interests center on how social science can facilitate community-based approaches to planning and management while enhancing the resilience and sustainability of communities both locally and abroad. Dr. Allred is passionate about engaging students in community-based work and leads a global service learning program called Global Citizenship and Sustainability, which is focused on indigenous community resilience. She works in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, Borneo, and recently spent her sabbatical investigating flood resilience in Bangkok. Her teaching at Cornell focuses on community-based research methods in natural resources, global service learning, environmental justice, and community organizing. She grew up in Texas as a first-generation college student and earned her PhD from Oregon State University and BS and MS from Penn State University. And here's the editorializing. I work with a lot of organizers in the EJ movement. And when we want to train young organizers, we usually send them off to a program that specializes in community organizing. And as you might suspect, those programs are not usually in large, prestigious research universities. And am delighted when I saw that Professor Allred teaches a course called Agents of Change, Community Organizing for the Public Good. I strongly suspect, Professor Allred, that you are the only person in high-powered research institutions teaching a course on community organizing. I think that's very cool. So I'm really interested in what you have to say. Professor Allred is going to talk about the EJ, environmental justice in Alabama Black Belt. Thank you, Professor Allred.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and also for the incredible work that you're doing around environmental justice. So I just wanted to say hello to everyone. Good afternoon. I'm really excited to be with all of you here today to talk about environmental justice in Alabama's Black Belt. So let me go ahead and share my slides and we will get started. Okay, so I am going to talk with you today about a project on community narratives of environmental justice that really centers the voices of the community around environmental justice issues. And as Dr. Sheets mentioned, the importance of community organizing and leadership around environmental justice issues, which of course has been there since the very beginning of the environmental justice movement. So I wanted to start by just acknowledging the important contributions of the Uniontown, Alabama community to this research. It represents a collaboration with Black Belt citizens fighting for health and justice in the community of Uniontown, Alabama. And as Leah Thomas says, we can't save the planet without uplifting the voices of its people, especially those often unheard, and in particular, those in communities of color and also low-income communities that are disproportionately impacted by environmental issues. So the research that I'll be sharing with you today takes a narrative inquiry approach to really honor the lived experiences as important sources of information in terms of knowledge and understanding, really wanting to provide great credence to the local knowledge that community members often have to bring with regard to environmental justice issues. We also, in this research, wanted to celebrate the rich African-American history of Uniontown through the stories of the people and the firsthand experiences they have with the land and its resources. We also wanted to analyze the history of community organizing through the historical perspectives of community members in the region, while facilitating active co-learning between university and community. And to do this research, we undertook in-depth narrative interviews, and that involved really going back to each person multiple times to clarify, to add detail, and to really create a profile of every community member that we interviewed, and then to get together collectively with Black Belt Citizens Fighting for Health and Justice, which is a local NGO, to really go through a meaning-making process. And that's the stage that the research is in right now. I also wanted to couple this with archival research to trace the history of the land and the people, and also conduct site visits to key areas, including African-American cemeteries, farmland, and the sites of industrial waste. So I wanted to start with the research methods up front, just to share a little bit about the approach that we did, which was very iterative and relied on participatory community-based research process, working collaboratively with a local community organization. So I wanted to share those research methods, and then also to talk about the broader social ecological context for the research, which is really about kind of shifting geographies and also livable geographies that are really rooted in the history of geographies and the people and the places and the socio-political environment that in which they are inhabited. And of course, really starting with environmental justice, that nationwide studies have shown again and again that Black and low-income people face the highest risk from things like death from power plant fine particle pollution, and it can likewise cause thousands of deaths, even across state lines. And so there's a number of studies that have continued to indicate the negative health and other repercussions associated with living near industrial pollutants and other stressors, other environmental stressors. We also bring in the idea of racial capitalism, which was, of course, coined by Cedric Robinson in the 1980s, that looked at the linkage between racism and capitalism, and defined it as the process of extracting social and economic value from a person of a different racial identity, referring predominantly to the extraction of value from those of a non-white identity. And so that really plays a strong role in Uniontown, which of course was the site of enslavement, and the cotton industry and the contributions economically that made on the backs of enslaved people. And so we really trace the history of the land from slavery through Reconstruction to current day. Also, the inequalities of waste disposal, that approximately 93% of landfills in the United States contain non-hazardous waste. Coal byproducts are a big part of that. They're legally considered to be non-hazardous waste. And most coal ash is stored either in landfills or surface ponds or impoundments, often located in close proximity to low-income communities. And one of the books that's really influenced me a lot is this book here. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to read. It's called Waste, One Woman's Fight Against America's Dirty Secret. Catherine Coleman Flowers, who writes about her experience fighting pollution in Lowndes County, Alabama, and she was the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Grant for the work that she has done. But it really goes to really exemplify a lot of the issues associated with waste disposal, access to clean water, et cetera, that often Black and low-income communities are subjected to. So I would like to start with a plantation called Pitt's Folly. And this is in Uniontown, Alabama. And this is in some ways, the beginning of a story that I'd like to tell about Uniontown, Alabama, and one of the fights, because the community has many things that they're advocating for on their behalf, but one of them is in relationship to this land and the land adjacent to it. And so Pitt's Folly. So Philip Henry Pitts was born in 1814. And he moved with his family to Uniontown, Alabama in 1833. He began construction on this house that you see here in 1852, and the house was finished about a year later. At the time, he owned several plantations, including Rurill Hill and King's Plantation as well. And he had 10 children, 2 of whom died in the American Civil War. And he was a cotton planter until his death in 1884. And this house continues to be occupied by descendants of Philip Henry Pitts today. So the legend goes that it was called Pitt's Folly, or nicknamed Pitt's Folly, because the people in the town thought it foolish to build such a expansive and large mansion on this particular property. And so I want to trace the history of this land called Pitt's Folly, but more specifically Rurill Hill, which was another plantation, one of the plantations owned by Philip Henry Pitts. And in the archival research, the Philip Henry Pitts papers, he talks about and documents the selling of Black bodies. Sally, born 1836, age 15, purchased from Mr. Williams. Julia, age 27, purchased from Mr. Gillespie. Dovey, age 3, child of Julia, purchased from Mr. Gillespie. Ben, age 11, also purchased from Mr. Gillespie. Kansas, age 7, purchased from Mr. Gillespie. Some were unnamed. The federal census slave schedule only refers to the enslaved people by group: female, age 34, female, age 17, female, age 13, male, age 10, female, age 8, female, age 6, male, age 2. So Rurill Hill, a vestige of slavery and enslaved people, is now the site of New Hope Cemetery. And Mary Jones Fitz is a professional genealogical researcher and advocate for African American history and information, really advocating for this history to be told, talks about New Hope Cemetery. And she says, in the case of New Hope Cemetery, the Pitts people own all of the land at New Hope Cemetery and that the New Hope Church was on. The Pitts had 3 plantations. They had Pitts Folly, Oak Lawn, and Rurill Hill. When I look at old maps from the 1900s, I see New Hope Cemetery and I see Rurill Hill. So Rurill Hill was the plantation that the Pitts owned right where New Hope Cemetery is. The New Hope Cemetery is the cemetery where the Pitts gave land to bury your people since there is a church right there. That's what they did sometimes. The plantation owner would give them land and say you could bury your people there. So it was either give them land near a church and bury your people there or bury them in the back of the plantation owner's cemetery. So the Pitts plantation is where many African Americans were buried. Both enslaved and following that, when land was given to or land was provided for burials on the plantation, and then afterwards, this land would often be not necessarily deeded to the community. And so they were given permission to bury people there, but often didn't carry a deed to that ownership. So one of the challenges is the recognition of these lands. And so in 2019, Mrs. Mary Jones Fitz was able to apply for Alabama Historic Cemetery Registry documentation for the New Hope Pitts Cemetery to really acknowledge the important history of this location, and also to provide that protection for it, because oftentimes the graves are unmarked. This is a photo that I took in the cemetery that actually has a headstone, but many of the burials were in unmarked graves, and so it can lead these to be subject to desecration. And so the New Hope Cemetery represents this contested space in the community. So why is that? So one of the reasons I would like to share with you from the perspective of the community members of Uniontown. So I'm going to play a short clip from a documentary that was done, a short film by Fraser Jones about the Uniontown community. And this clip is going to feature community activists and organizers, Mrs. Esther Calhoun, Mrs. Sally Jones, and Mr. Ben Eaton, who ran for county commissioner, to really play a stronger role in advocating in the political system for Uniontown.
Okay. The start, so what are we doing? We got to get our town back, man. We got to fight, not with hands. We got to continue to talk. Things don't change if we're not changing it together. And together we can make it happen.
I'm running for Perry County Commissioner, District 5. The role entails for the county commissioner, they're the ones that handles the money, the budget, the hiring for the county. They won't see any more neglection. They won't have anyone to disappear on them. They have someone that actually care about them.
Just experimenting with the garden in the backyard. Carrots, mustard greens, turnip greens. And this is a pea that I got from my mom. I noticed it looks a little rough now. I haven't had time to do it. Clean around it because, you know, actually Black Belt citizens work takes a lot of time and family takes a lot of time. You scared? Nathalia was only coming up to be 1 when I got him.
Come on.
He didn't grow in my belly, but he grew in my heart.
Oh, come over here, man. Don't break your ankle now.
Hoping things get better for them because right now they don't have a bright future here.
Right.
But we're not going to stop until things get better.
This is the future. We'll have decent schools and hospitals and a pool for kids to go out in the summer. We'll have Walmart, Burger King. Oh, I forgot the library too, because gotta learn.
Oh, yeah. Y'all are our future. And if y'all fail, the future is gone. Because we're going to die off Earth. People don't understand it. The kids are our future. Most white people, they leave things for their kids. And Black people want to do the same thing. They want to leave things for their kids. They don't want to dump. This is nothing to give their kids.
There were 4 million tons of coal ash that were sent here from Kingston, Tennessee.
People's health has changed since coal ash came into Uniontown.
You got breathing problems, sleep apnea, all the liver problems that we have here, all the people that are on dialysis. Why is it happening?
Because I had arthritis in my leg and arthritis in my back, and I got acid reflux, and it's just all kinds of stuff that happened to me since I've been here.
Right now, 3 people that live right across the street from the landfill have passed away.
I mean, a landfill in front of your house, right when you walk out your door? I mean, who does that?
People don't like landfills. Nobody likes a landfill in their backyard. I mean, that's, I think, evident. And for people to voice that, certainly they've got a right to do that. The thing that we do not believe people have a right to do is to say that you are intentionally poisoning the streams, that you are intentionally poisoning our groundwater. And it was only when they made those claims that even letters were written asking them to retract.
They slapped a lawsuit on us for $30 million. It was from what they call slander.
The $30 million, I think, has been, it's actually was 15. There were 2 counts, but they each contained 15. And that was what we felt the lost business opportunity was for us as a result of the adverse publicity that was being put out.
Only thing we were doing was freedom of speech, trying to protect our community. Won't you try to protect your community?
Okay, I just wanted to show you a clip from that documentary to show the landfill. Now, the landfill is directly adjacent to the cemetery that I just described. And I thought it was important to really present that historical context about just geographies and how these spaces of oppression and discrimination and all of these other issues have transformed during enslavement to areas that continue to take a toll on the Uniontown community. So the lawsuit that was mentioned, the $30 million lawsuit, or excuse me, the $15 million lawsuit that had 2 counts, was eventually dismissed. But the effects of that were really long lasting in terms of the community members feeling like if they spoke up, then they would be subject to legal repercussions for speaking out against what was happening at the landfill, which is adjacent to this historical African-American cemetery. So I wanted to take a step back and talk about coal ash, because this is one of the things that community members were protesting being disposed of at the landfill, in addition to potential desecration of or encroachment of the landfill onto the sites where people were buried. And so these were some of the things that the community was quite concerned about. And so coal ash is a byproduct of burning coal for energy. And so a lot of times we think about coal-fired power plants as the emissions being one of the primary pollutants. And of course, carbon dioxide and the issues associated with that are enormous. But there's also a solid waste that comes from a byproduct of burning coal for energy that is really just starting to get attention in the policy realm in terms of having protections for communities where this byproduct of coal combustion is being stored. So it's disposed of in terms of it's the second largest industrial waste produced, and 119 million tons are produced each year. Some of it gets recycled into concrete and roads and things like that, but the remainder is disposed of in landfills and ponds. And the constituent components of coal ash by themselves are considered toxic, but together are not. And so what is happening around the country is that we're seeing that as this, because it's not classified as a hazardous waste, it can be disposed of in landfills, and sometimes if it's disposed of in these holding ponds. And if an embankment fails, it goes directly into surface and groundwater, and the same for landfills, that because it can be disposed of along with household municipal waste, it can become an issue. And this is just starting within the past 5 years to actually be acknowledged in federal and state policy. So coal ash. So we already know that nationwide, Black and low income people face the highest risk of death from power plants. But the residues, so that's just the fine particle pollution, which is toxic. But we also have this emerging public health threat of coal combustion products, which researchers are just starting to identify and publish studies that are looking at communities that live near where these products are being disposed of and what the health impacts are. So what happens? So many of you are quite familiar with the coal ash, the 2008 Kingston, Tennessee coal ash spill. This was something that made national news. There was a failure of a dike used to contain the coal ash at a dewatering area at the Tennessee Valley Authority Kingston Fossil Plant, which is located in Rowan County, Tennessee. And when the dike failed, approximately 5.4 million cubic yards of coal ash were released eventually into the Emory River. And it also extended 300 acres outside of the area, immediate area as well. So once this happened, the area had to be cleaned up. And so when this toxic waste was, or it's not considered a toxic waste, but when the coal ash waste was being cleaned up in Tennessee, the question was, where do we put it? Well, this is where Uniontown comes in, because Uniontown was selected as the Arrowhead landfill was selected as the location to receive the 5.4 million tons of coal ash that originated from the Kingston, Tennessee coal ash spill. So that is when community members in Uniontown really started to come together and protest once they found out that this coal ash was on its way to Uniontown, they came together to really protest and say, you know, we're a community this waste. And in 2015, under the Obama administration, the very first regulation of coal ash, substantive regulation of coal ash was passed. It's called the 2015 Coal Ash Rule. And it's under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA. And so it basically allowed the coal ash impoundments and things like that to actually be regulated for the first time. And then in 2016, the Water Infrastructure Improvement for the Nation Act was also passed, which addressed the fact that not the solid waste, but more of the impact to water from leakage, both from landfills and also from the ponds, because a lot of the ponds were basically not even lined, and so the materials, the components were basically getting into groundwater. And of course, during the previous administration, there were rollbacks to really weaken the 2015 Coal Ash Rule and the WIN Act. And so this is a contested space in the policy world, as well as really seeing what the Biden administration is going to do with this. And some states have opted for stronger regulation, and so only time will tell what will become of this coal ash rule and the act after the 2019 rollbacks. The one thing that did stick was monitoring. So for the first time, we actually have monitoring data on the water and impacts of coal ash disposal, which I'll share in just a minute. So, this was the big thing that Uniontown residents were really upset over is, why should Uniontown, Alabama, be the site of disposal of the Tennessee coal ash? So that was something that led to a lot of the environmental justice activism by Black Belt citizens fighting for health and justice. So I mentioned monitoring data that's available now under the new coal ash regulations. And now we know that 91% of coal plants have unsafe levels of one or more coal ash constituents. I mentioned the components of coal ash are things, there's about 20 different chemicals. Arsenic, barium, mercury, lead, sulfate are some of the higher ones, but basically almost all coal plants have unsafe levels of these now that there's monitoring data. The monitoring data also shows that 76% of disposal sites have unsafe levels of coal ash pollutants at landfills, and also at the impoundments for those that are storing it in a water-based way with ponds or impoundments. So this is a problem, right? So the communities where this coal ash is bound for are being subject to unsafe levels of these toxic pollutants, which on their own are toxic, but for some reason, when they're constituted together, they're not considered toxic. So that's a huge problem for communities like Uniontown. And here's some drone footage of the landfill that we recorded this summer, just so you can see the scope of it. It was raining that day, so you see a little bit of the rain on the camera, but you can see the scope of the landfill in relationship to the surrounding landscape. So one of the things that is an issue is, of course, environmental racism. And, you know, the community of Uniontown filed a civil rights complaint with the Environmental Protection Agency. It unfortunately was it did not move forward in terms of being accepted as a legitimate argument for why the community was being subjected to unfair discrimination. And the case in Uniontown was similar to cases all over the US, that most of the EPA civil rights cases that the office sees are either rejected or have no review. And the 64 cases that are accepted, this is at a national level, those often languish in process. So some of them have actually been accepted, meaning EPA will go through the review process to determine the evidence and evidence of discrimination with the complaints, and it'll just stay there for a decade. And so this is a real problem. And it's the same, these are the statistics for Alabama. If we look at civil rights cases that were brought by the EPA, most were rejected. Three had no review, 5 were accepted for investigation. But as you can see here, ongoing. You know, one of the cases has still been in review since 2003, and only one was actually resolved. So, so this is a major issue, and the reason is, of course, the environmental racism. And so there's been quite a few reports that have been put out, whether it's Deloitte, their consulting report evaluating the EPA Office of Civil Rights. The NAACP put out a really detailed report on the impact of coal plants, putting profits before people. The Center for Public Integrity did a study. That's where the data came from that I just showed. They did a in-depth study of civil rights cases that come before the EPA. And Laura Polito is a researcher that, you know, really argues that actually relying on the state to address environmental justice claims has been hindering the environmental justice movement. And she and her authors really advocate for that is not an effective strategy, because there has rarely been less than half of 1% of EPA's civil rights cases are actually found for the plaintiffs. So in the case of Uniontown, it's a town in the heart of Alabama's Black Belt region, which is a region, you know, named for its rich soils, which really contributed to the growth of the cotton industry during slavery, and why the soils were so productive, because they have this Selma chalk. They have this really rich, dark, fertile soils. And this is also a region that also has very high populations of African Americans. And unfortunately, it's also plagued by high, poverty, unemployment, et cetera. But there are many other characteristics to the Black Belt region of Alabama. These are just a few maps here. It's a contested definition as to what the Black Belt is and which counties are included. But in general, it is this area of black fertile soil, based on the geology of the area, but also the socio-political context, as well as it has become known in recent times. And so Uniontown has 3 industrial facilities. They have this landfill with millions of cubic yards of coal ash. There's also a catfish plant and a cheese corporation, which also are heavy water users and also having to dispose of waste products from cheese production, things like whey. And so it's not just the landfill, but also other source industrial facilities. And so the wastewater treatment is also an issue in the community because this prevalence of that chalky clay soil, unfortunately, that doesn't allow the water to really stay in the soil. It actually runs off pretty quickly. And so things like using lagoons and spray fields for sewage treatment have not been very effective, and it actually led to contamination of the local waterways. And, there was a UN report back a few years ago that talked about how, poverty in the Black Belt of Alabama is similar to what we see in developing countries as well. And so there was a UN human rights report that was really wanting to bring attention to the importance of this region of our country. So we don't need to go through all of these details, but I just wanted to show that in Uniontown, it's primarily African-American community, high unemployment, and high percent of people living below poverty level of all races, but in particular Blacks as well. And, Perry County is, in terms of the historical and contemporary context, is played a really important role in the civil rights movement. In 1963, the events in the county seat of Marion, Alabama, just 20 miles away from Uniontown, would lead to the historic march from Selma to Montgomery to demand voting rights for African-American citizens, and ultimately lead in the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And residents continue to struggle to have equal rights to clean air and water, to have that recognized in current times. So Coretta Scott King is from Perry County, as is another matriarch of the civil rights movement, Juanita Abernathy. And we have our current day leaders, such as Commissioner Ben Eaton, who is seen here with Senator Booker, and also Mrs. Esther Calhoun, who was featured in the Uniontown documentary and continues to work on behalf of Uniontown residents. So I just wanted to share, the Biden administration, promises to focus on environmental justice. The infrastructure bill and the 40% of funds that are supposed to go to EJ communities, I think, can really make a big difference. But a big part of it is also strengthening the regulations around coal ash, and also thinking about the environmental justice claims that are already there, because these are issues that the community has been fighting for quite some time. So I just wanted to leave you with a few words from some of the interviews that we've done with community members. This is Commissioner Ben Eaton, that really ran on a platform of helping to address some of the environmental justice issues in the community, that he really wants to fight. Whatever fight you have in you is needed here in Uniontown now. And his thoughts on environmental racism, that these things would not happen in a predominantly white community, that they have a tendency to seek out our community first because of what we have been on the end of that string for the longest. And so I think his words provide a lot of important wisdom for thinking about how to address these issues. Is really, they really wanted to think in terms of Black Belt citizens and the community, really thinking about, well, how can we be in positions of power within government so that we can be the people making these decisions about coal ash and about the water treatment and these things that are happening in Uniontown today. So I want to leave some time for questions. So I think, is it that I should be wrapping up about right now, and then we could allow time for some questions.
Thank you, Professor Allred.
Thank you.
Interesting presentation. And we do have time for questions. You can put your questions in the Q&A box there, and I will see them, or Keely Swan from the center will see them. But I have a question to start off with. I'm just interested in how the community organized itself, and how were you able to interact? Was there a community organization? Mm-hmm. Was it interacting with individuals that were that didn't have an organization? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I would say it was a little bit of both. So Black Belt Citizens Fighting for Health and Justice has been at the forefront of this, of the fight, if you will, for environmental justice and food justice and a lot of other issues in Uniontown, really working on behalf of the community. So I've had the good fortune to be able to collaborate with them. Mr. Commissioner Ben EATON is the president, and Adam Johnston is the coordinator. So working closely with them, but also working with community members that may not be affiliated with a particular organization, but may have been teachers, are farmers, are people in the local community involved in civic life. And so we've really tried to get a diversity of perspectives on that.
How did you first get involved, Professor Allred? How did you hear about it?
I first heard about it through my colleague, Scott Peters, who knew Mrs. Esther Calhoun and Adam Johnston, and had met them on a previous occasion. And it was actually through my community organizing class. So we had actually invited Mrs. Esther Calhoun and Mr. Adam Johnston to give a talk in our community organizing class so that students could hear from people working on the ground for real change in their communities. And so that was actually how I first met them. And then there was a real desire to document the stories of community members, particularly the elders in the community. And so that's why we undertook this community narratives project to really profile the community members and the organizers and everything that they're doing.
And see, I knew that community organizing class was key.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I knew that.
Yes.
Folks, if you have questions, you can also just raise your hand, and we will call on you. And I see one question, Professor Allred, and it says, following up with community context and how you first heard about them. How did you establish trust with community members? And was it difficult? How long did it take?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is a really important point, and one that as a researcher that's not from Uniontown, I always feel like I'm continually working at, which is building trust and those relationships. And so part of it was really going and spending time in the community and, getting to know people there. Having dinners, really just not even the interviews, but just getting to know people even before we started the interviews. So that really played a strong role. I think also, just conversations with the community leaders about what they wanted to get out of the collaboration and what we could achieve together, and constantly, revisiting that over time. And one of the things that we're working on right now is a book project. And so we really are, working with, for example, Mary Jones Fitz as a genealogist to write one of the chapters in the book because she really knows the genealogy and the history. And so we really want her voice to really come through when we talk about the cemeteries and how they've become these, contested spaces, in this case, impacted by a landfill that's accepting coal ash.
Mm-hmm. So you really are following the community-based participatory research model there. Having the community actually write parts of the book.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We have another question. It says, thank you for the presentation. And I was wondering if you could say more about how the project timelines work, both from the academic side and the community side. How do you make sure the project timelines and goals work for both the community and academic side? And also, how do you make sure any funding agencies that were necessary to your work become involved?
Yes, so this is a really, really great question. And as somebody that does community-based participatory action research, is something that always is an issue, is academic timelines and community timelines are different. Most people don't think in semesters and academic years and those kinds of things. And funding is short term often, whereas these relationships, you hope, are long term. So it's a great question. And like one of the things that we did was we recently put in a national endowment for the humanities grant to really continue this work and create a story map and really create a public content management system and interface for the stories and the histories and all the photographs that we're collecting. And so we hope that through collaboratively going after grants like that, and that there's money in the budget for the community organizations so that their time is compensated for participation. As much as I can, I really try to make sure all my, the funding actually compensates community members for their time, because it is valuable, and I really respect that. And then again, like the book is takes a long time to write a book. You have to do the proposal, get it accepted, all of that, that unfortunately is taking a lot longer than I wish it would, because, the issues are happening right now. But that's one of the reasons we wanted to really create this public facing interface for the stories, where people could really interact with it on a website, through a story map, so that the book may be 2 years out, but this could be something we do in the next year. So we'll try to balance it with academic outputs and also more public facing outputs as well. Like we really need to have both and not just one or the other.
Right. Yeah, timing's always a tough thing.
Yes.
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Another question is, do you have any ideas about why there's such a backlog and large rejection of EJ claims at EPA? Is there something citizens can do to bring attention to such claims?
Yeah, this is a really another excellent question, because, all the federal agencies have a civil rights office. And so if you look at the education department, for example, they hear 5,000 cases a year. And the EPA doesn't hear a fraction of that. So I don't know, it could be staffing. There's a number of kind of issues, and these reports that I mentioned earlier have kind of outlined some of it. It's a serious issue, and the current administration says, has vowed that they're going to do something to change it. One is that the EPA Office of Civil Rights has often been reactionary rather than, so they're responding to cases that are brought to them versus proactively going out and kind of seeking cases. And so that is something that I know is an issue, probably staffing as well. I'm not sure the size of the EPA's office compared to the Department of Education's office, but just they need to hear more cases, because there's so many cases that never see the light of day, and then those that do often do not get resolved, and so it can be very discouraging for communities to bring these cases forward, because if they have to partner with ACLU or an organization that can carry the legal burden of bringing these cases and the evidence forward. And that's really hard for an organization of volunteers. So I think it's a big issue, but we definitely need to put pressure on the Biden administration and the EPA administrators to change the nature of that particular office, because it has not been a source of recourse for environmental injustices that have happened.
Yeah, and just like you said, I know the EJ community is waiting to see what the Biden administration will do.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of EJ people worried about that and working on it. Our last question, and thank you so much for the presentation. Very interesting. You don't hear a lot about this. We don't hear enough about what you're talking about, Professor Allred. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Did you face any pushback from the landfill executives and or the community in this research? And how are you making this research accessible to the community, given how inaccessible academic research can be?
Yes. Sometimes be very inaccessible. So those are great questions. Have I experienced any pushback? Not yet. I have not spoken directly with anyone from the landfill. I would be happy to do so, but we haven't experienced any concerns with them thus far, and have proceeded with a project to use ground penetrating radar to actually map the unmarked graves in the cemetery, and so we're moving forward with that, and hopefully won't experience any issues moving forward. What was the second part of the question?
How do you make research accessible to the community? Yeah.
Yes. So I think that's a really good point. And that's something that we're trying to do with our NEH grant that would create, it's called Storylines of Environmental Justice, Mapping a People's History of Uniontown. And it would allow us to create a web interface where we could actually have interactive photos and stories from the interviews that we're doing, but also have a content management system where, like, if you're on a mobile phone, you could actually upload your own story to the database so that you become part of this tapestry of Uniontown's history and future trajectory stories. So hopefully, fingers crossed, our grant gets funded so we can create this interactive interface that would hopefully engage young people in the community, as well as others that are want to learn more about this rich and important history in the community.
And I am peeking at the time, and I see that we are unfortunately out of time. But thank you very much for your presentation and for just importantly answering these questions. And perhaps I sure would like to see you come back and tell us more as things progress about how things are progressing. I think that would be.
I would love to. Thank you so much. And maybe it would be in person next time.
Yeah, so hopefully, and it won't be in the not too distant future also.
Right, yeah, I would love that. We'll continue working on this, and I really appreciate all the great questions and the opportunity to speak with all of you and spend the afternoon together.
Thank you very much. Hopefully the audience will be back for the next Bradford seminar. And thank everybody for tuning in, and thanks again, Professor Allred.
Yeah, no problem.